Hi, my name is Nathan, and I'm going to talk about the newest version of my FPL optimization tool. And first, I just want to say, if you get confused or just have a question, you can always reach out to me through Discord or Twitter or email or YouTube. So before I show how to use the tool, I want to briefly explain the main idea of this tool and how it works if you aren't familiar with it. So this tool is meant to be used in conjunction with predictive data for FPL players, which is in the form of expected points. And the idea is that once you generate those points, you can take them and you can use an optimization solver to solve for the optimal transfers based on those numbers, subject to all of the different FPL constraints, such as formation, budget, free transfers, -4 points per additional transfer, wildcard usage, all of those things. So that's the main idea. And this tool has gradually become very detailed and customizable over time with not only all of the built-in constraints, but also the adjustable parameters that are available in particular with version 4. And this will help to give you results that are not only very accurate with respect to the player points, but also the results are tailored specifically to your team and however you want to set up your solve and your different parameters. Additionally, my tool is completely transparent, considering it's an Excel file and nothing is protected or hidden, so you can see the extent to which I've set up my Excel file as an optimization problem for FPL. So you can see all my formulas and constraints and everything, so there's no ambiguity. So that's a summary of my tool, and of course you don't always need a tool like this to make good transfer decisions every week. I won't pretend like that's the case, since there will be times when you've already made up your mind regardless of what any tool is recommending. But this tool could be very useful if it's not clear what your transfer plan should be, especially if you actually take the time to make your expected points as accurate as possible, because the quality of the results will be a function of the quality of the inputs. So if you take the time to adjust and curate your player points, the tool will be able to give you some solid, meaningful transfer ideas. Okay, so before using this tool, so this is really step one. The first thing you need to do is download the opensolver add-on for Excel. And I'll provide a link for this in the description. But basically, you just go to the opensolver website and you just download it and enable it in Excel. And just make sure that you download this linear version. So once you do that, which of course you only need to do it once, you can then start to use the tool regularly. And by the way, you can check to make sure that opensolver is enabled correctly if it shows up here where I'm circling with my mouse. Okay, so once you've downloaded opensolver, the first actual step to using my tool is to generate your expected points and prepare and format that data properly in Excel so you can paste it directly into my tool. And overall, this is not difficult, once you actually have a source of expected points, such as FPL Review. So the best way to generate accurate expected points is by going to the site that I just mentioned, which is fplreview.com, and using their model for expected points. Now, as of literally yesterday, or I guess the day before now, the primary model on this website, as well as the 8-game week horizon of points, is now only available if you pay money for it. So it's your choice whether or not you want to pay the money for it. Ultimately, it doesn't affect how my tool is used. You can use the free model points from this website for my tool, or you can use some other source of expected points. I personally have the premium model, which a lot of other people have as well. So that's what I'll be showing. But just remember, you can use any source of expected points, because the point of my tool is to see an optimal solution based on whatever data you feed it, so long as you format the players in the exact same way that I do. It'll just take you a little bit longer to do that if you're not using FPL review. Okay, so if you are using one of the FPL review models, be sure to adjust your expected points to your liking. And then if you have the premium model like I do, you can go ahead and export the data directly to Excel. Before we sort and trim down the player data right here, I want to show what the end result needs to look like first, because this is important. So it is required that the first 40 players are defenders, and then the next 20 players are forwards. Then the next 15 players are goalkeepers, and then the last 35 players are midfielders. Okay, so if you do the math, this is a total of 110 rows of 110 players. So this is cutting out all of the irrelevant FPL players in an effort to reduce the solve times as much as possible, because the more players you have, the more complicated of an optimization problem it becomes. And I found that this number of players is a good balance and includes all of the relevant FPL players. So for example, like you obviously don't need to include every 4.0 goalkeeper or every 4.0 defenders. But also there's a lot of players that, once you sort the players correctly, like by total points, like within each position, you start to see players like Lacazette or Sterling. Like these are obvious examples, but like you can see, most players don't really have a chance of being picked in the optimal solution. Okay, so once again, it's very important to satisfy the exact amount of players in those positions and make sure the positions are in the correct order that I mentioned. Okay, so from here, and this is what we got from FPL Review, the first thing you can do is you can delete all of the expected minutes columns, and you can also delete the buying value column, and then you can delete row 1. Then in column M, we're going to create a column which is the sum of the expected points of all of the players. Once you have this, you can highlight all the columns. You can go to Data, Sort, and you can sort first by position. And then within each position, you can sort by column M, which is total points. So now within each position, it's sorted by total points. So you have all of the best players in each position towards the top. And so through a combination of looking at this and looking at the prices of the players, you can kind of see which players should be kept and which players should be deleted. Okay, so once you have 110 players, the last step here is just to delete columns M and A because you don't need them anymore. And now this should be finished. So you can copy the 110 rows and like make sure you just copy the cells and not like the rows or the columns. And then so you take those cells and you paste it into my tool. You can go ahead and paste it directly into cell A1. That's fine. I personally like to keep a copy of the points in one of these sheets down here. Like I do it in the points sheet, just so I have a copy of the points, but you don't need to do that. You can just paste it directly into cell A1 if you want. Just make sure that you have the correct amount of cells pasted in here, and you should be copying or pasting over, all the way up to the K column. Okay, so now we can start learning how to actually use the tool. And I will explain all the inputs right now, like in the correct order, but I also have a hopefully useful legend towards the bottom here, which may help remind you what the different colors mean in the future. So first we'll look at the yellow cells. You will always start with inputting your team in column L here by putting a 1 next to the 15 players on your current team. For this reason, by the way, when you are trimming down your players before this, you have to include the players on your team, of course, within these 110 players. If you happen to be using this tool before game week 1 of the season, and therefore you don't have an initial team, then in this special case, you can input any combination of 15 players because it's not going to matter since you are solving for a brand new team for game week 1 in this case anyways. So as long as it's a valid team and it's within like your budget, because my tool will still do a check on your formation and budget and everything for the initial team. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And then, I don't want to confuse people too much, but you will also need to set up your solve to play a wild card for the upcoming game week 1 of the season, if it is, that case. But I will show you how to do that later. Okay, so once you've input your team into the yellow cells of the L column, because that's all we've done so far, then you can input the free transfers, the number of free transfers you have, as well as the selling value of your team, which I call the budget here. So the selling value, if it's not clear, is the amount of money that you would have like if you sold your entire team. And FPL Review gives this number to you after you input your team ID, but you can also check on like the FPL website as well. And if it's before game week 1, you can just put 100 for the budget. Or if you want to use less, you could do 99.5. And then you could use 1 for the free transfer. If you're wild carding, for any week that you're wild carding, you can put a 1 for the free transfer. Okay. And so now we can move on to the purple cells, which are more of the optional cells that you should always take a look at and make sure you have the inputs that you want, but they're not necessarily required for you to change. So first we look at the M column. So the M column is for constraining certain players to your team. And you can use a one for that, for all of those players. For this to work, the adjacent cell in the L column must also equal 1. And this will normally be the case anyways. Like if you're not, wild carding, you'll already have a team, and then there are certain players on that team that you'll want to constrain to your team. But once again, like if it's before game week 1, I mentioned to you that you can use any combination of 15 players, but if you want to constrain a certain player to your team, then you must include that particular player in your initial team in column L. Okay, so just remember that. And then here on the right side, we have a list of the English Premier League team names. And then to the left of that, we have a number next to the names. The numbers in this column, in column AA, indicate the max number of players from that team that you want for all of your FPL teams. So either a 2 or a 3 would be reasonable for all of these teams. But of course, you're free to do whatever you want. The reason why I have the team names highlighted in purple as well is because these team names have to match the team names that are in column C. If you use FPL Review for expected points, then the team names will match by default, because like I mentioned earlier, everything here is kind of set up to accept FPL Review data. But if you have different team names associated with these players in column C, then you need to change column AB accordingly. Okay. Now I want to talk about the optional inputs associated with playing a chip, because they make up a pretty large percentage of the rest of the purple cells. So first of all, if you see one of these labels in column Y directly next to the purple cells, and regardless of whether it's a red or a blue label, then you must change one of these purple cells if you plan on playing a chip for a particular week. So for example, in row 6, there is a TC label in row Y indicating that one of these purple cells needs to be adjusted in order to activate your triple captain for that week. If you hover your mouse over the cell or any of these cells, the instructions are given to you. In this case, we must use a 2 for the week that we want to play the triple captain chip and leave the rest as 1. It's that simple. For both the bench boost and the wild card, you will notice that there are multiple labels. So there are, as you could guess, multiple rows that need to be adjusted. Again, you can hover your mouse over any of these and it'll tell you the instructions for what numbers to use, okay? And finally, you may have noticed that I'm using 2 different colors for the wild card specifically. So I'm using both red and blue, and you may wonder what is the difference. I also explain it down here, but the difference is simply that the red labels indicate that the purple cells are only applicable to playing a chip, which is the wild card, whereas the blue labels of the wild card inputs indicate that the purple cells are applicable to not only playing a chip but also for any of the weeks when you're not playing a chip. Okay, so for example, in row 22 here, it shows a blue wildcard label. And this row of inputs is for the it's for the max number of transfers every week. So you must use a 15 for the week that you intend on using a wildcard. And that makes sense given what these purple cells represent, which I just mentioned is the max number of transfers for each week. So for example, if the season hasn't started yet, I would put a 15 for week 1 because, you know, in a sense, we're all wildcarding that first week, right? And then let's say that game week 1 has occurred already and game week 2 will occur next. Now I can remove the 15 and, you know, then I could use whatever max number of transfers that I want the solver to make for game week, you know, for game week 2. So maybe I'd use a 1 or a 0 or even a higher number if you don't mind the solver potentially taking a hit. So the significance of the blue label is that the cells must be changed for using a chip. However, the purple cells can still take on other values for any of the weeks, even if you are, you know, not playing the wildcard chip. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So the other blue label can be found in row 34. And this controls the amount of additional transfers that are made beyond the number of free transfers that you had going into that week. So you would use a -15 for a wildcard week, but then you can adjust these cells in general for any of the weeks if you want to take more potential like hits or less hits. So I would recommend just leaving them at -1 if you're not sure, but you may need to change this to a -2 or a -3, perhaps if a blank or double game week is coming up, because the solver may want to take multiple hits in such a case. And now I have already explained 2 of the 3 sets of wildcard inputs, so I will explain the third one, which is row 28 here. And here you must use a 0 for wildcard week and a 4 otherwise. And that's really all you need to know about that one. So to conclude my discussion about the chips, I want to mention that there is no label for free hit. And that's because there's a separate set of instructions for what to do for a free hit, which is on the sheet that's labeled free hit, obviously. And hopefully these instructions are clear enough, but again, you can always ask me or my Discord chat for help. And to clarify, if it's not already obvious, this tool does not tell you when to use a chip because at the moment anyways, I think human logic is still the best thing to use with regard to choosing when to use chips. Okay, now finally I will go over the rest of the purple cells which are not associated with the chips. And again, these are optional inputs, but it is in your best interest to at least pay attention to what these are and be able to, you know, kind of think for yourself in terms of how to potentially adjust them and play around with them. So in row 3, this is an implementation of what some people call time decay, and it's a multiplier that is applied to each week of total points and progressively gets smaller. This is to reflect the idea that expected points will become less accurate over time, and so in theory, if you focused a little more on the near-term game weeks, then this would lead to a more like true optimal solution. So cell 03 is actually a cell that you can use as an input because I'm taking 03, like this number, and I'm increasing the exponent progressively to achieve these weights in these purple cells. But, you know, like if you want, you can delete 03 and just type in your own weights if you think you have like better numbers or better formula. But I just like to change this value and, you know, let it change the purple cells. Okay. So there you go. So you can leave this on 0.9 if you want, or you can try going as low as 0.8 or 0.7 if you want to place more emphasis on the near-term game weeks and seeing what those results look like. It's whatever you want to do, but I personally like to use 0.9. Now we jump down to the formation constraints, which are rows 16 through 18, and there are 6 of them to adjust. And these will adjust the formations of your starting 11 players every week. So the inputs on the left are the minimum players in each position, and the inputs on the right are the maximum players in each position. And remember, this is for your starting XI. And I have the word max here so you can remember which one is for the max, which one is for the minimum. So different people have different theories on what kind of formations they want and how flexible, you know, they want to be. Personally, I like to use just a maximum of 4 starting defenders. So that would be as opposed to using 5. And I leave the rest untouched, but you know, you can do whatever you want. Like I said, different people think different things about formations. Okay. In cell 021, we have the max number of transfers throughout all 8 weeks. And so this is just an alternate way of constraining your transfers to add another level of, you know, maybe being conservative with your transfers. In row 30, the only reason why I have these individual budget cells purple is because you could theoretically change each of these manually to potentially account for like rising team value or something along those lines, but that certainly is not necessary. So, you know, I just have it set up to where you type in one budget or selling value, and then it automatically adjusts the budget for every week. So down here, I have some different weights that you can adjust. So row 40 has a weight for your first substitute. And the reason why this is here is because there is some chance that a player from your starting 11 does not play. So this number represents that estimated chance as a percentage and can be approximated pretty well around 0.2, but it can change depending on like your team as the season goes on. But in general, if you want more money invested on your bench, you can make this value bigger, and then obviously the opposite is true as well. I made sub 2, the sub 2 weight, just a function of the sub 1 because I'm lazy and honestly it doesn't matter much anyway. In fact, I don't even have the third sub in here because I was too lazy to include it, but it really wouldn't affect your solution much anyways. And then cells, let's see, what is this? Cells Q46 and 47. Oh, okay, I guess I skipped this one. This is the substitute, the goalie substitute weight. So this is also very small. It makes a very, very small difference. Okay, it's the percent chance that your starting goalie won't play. Okay, so these next two here for cells Q46 and 47, I'll group these together because they kind of do a similar thing. They add artificial value to storing more money in your bank and banking your free transfer respectively. The idea is that we will artificially get, so in this case, 0.1 more points per 0.1 million left in the bank. So it's basically extra incentive for the solver to keep money in the bank. And it's the same idea for the free transfer parameter. You're giving the solver X amount of points in exchange for not spending its free transfer on a weekly basis. If that makes sense. So in general, use a higher number if you want to be like more conservative, or make both 0 if you don't care about being more conservative, which is not unreasonable because there are other ways to constrain your free transfers and your budget. So for example, you can simply start with like a smaller budget, even if your actual FPL team has a bigger budget. Or you can manually constrain like your max number of transfers each week, like in a strict manner using row 22, which is what I personally like to do. You can kind of see that I've done it here. Sorry, my computer's freezing a little bit. So you can see I've constrained the max number of transfers here pretty significantly. So only 2 transfers total, one after game week, the 3rd week here and the 4th week here. So it's kind of just whatever you want to do. They're both viable approaches. So last but not least, I have a parameter for no hopping, for lack of a better word. So this simply prevents a player from hopping to and from your team like within the 8 weeks, as in selling and rebuying a player or buying and selling a player. Because the solver will occasionally do this as part of the optimal solution, like, to squeeze out another fraction of a point, when in reality, it's probably a bad idea and a waste of a transfer. So there's usually no point in planning for something like that. So that's why this parameter is typically useful to enable. And so the way I set up my tool, I had to use 2 separate parameters for no hopping, depending on if a wild card is being played, which as we know now includes game week 1 of the season. So if a wild card is being played, then use a 1 for like the wild card version, and then you can use a 3 for the other one. If a wild card is not being played, which is almost every other game week, you can use a 1 for both of them. And if you want to disable this parameter completely, you can use a 3 for both parameters. Okay, so that is all of the different inputs that this tool has. So again, start with the yellow ones and then review all of the purple ones after that. That's generally what you can do, and it goes pretty fast, once you get used to all of the inputs. And so once all of the inputs are there, you can go to the data tab right here, and then you can click the solve button, and the elapsed time for the solves varies. It's probably around 100 seconds on average. But I think there are many factors. If a window pops up saying like no solution or something like that, then you probably have done something wrong. And if you can't figure it out, once again, just ask me or ask my Discord, and we can probably figure it out pretty quickly. Once the solve is finished, the front sheet, which I haven't shown yet, the front sheet will display the results in a very visually pleasing and organized fashion. And the subs will also be in order if you apply a non-zero weight to the subs. In addition to the front sheet, you can also go back to your main sheet, and then this shade of blue here in the main sheet will show you some additional information. A lot of this overlaps from the front sheet, but over here, for example, on the right, you can see how many players from each Premier League team are on all of your FPL teams. And the very light blue, which is almost a gray, this color cell, these are fixed, and you can pretty much ignore these cells. So finally, to conclude how to use the tool, I have a cell down here, way down here, and you can take this cell P63, and you can take that formula and you can paste it into cell P1 if you are using the FPL Review free model with the 5-game week horizon instead of the 8-game week horizon. So the only difference with this alternate formula is it's going to tell the solver to solve only for 5-game weeks. So it's only going to look at columns D through H here of expected points. And then you will only pay attention to teams 1 through 5 on the front sheet. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're adjusting the parameters. Okay, so I think I have finally covered everything. So, if you made it this far into the video, then congratulations. And I hope you get some use out of the tool, or, just try it for fun and see how it works. I mean, since it's free, of course, I don't do this for money. So this is really just a personal project of mine that I'm happy to share with other people. So consider joining my Discord if you're interested in analytical stuff for FPL or just FPL in general. There's a lot of really smart people in there, so there's a lot of good quality discussions, and it's always friendly as well. So I hope you all have a good season, and that's all I have to say. Thanks.